My name is Micah Abram, and what I'm about to share defies logic and challenges everything I once held as truth. I've spent my life grounded in the real world, anchored in facts, in the wisdom of our sacred texts, and in the long history of my people. For over 20 years, I've worked as a historian and curator at the Jewish Museum of Rome, convinced that the answers to life's mysteries lay hidden in the fragile scrolls of the past. If someone had told me, just months ago, that I would have a spiritual encounter so profound it would upend all my beliefs, I would have simply smiled and moved on. And yet, here I am. It was a Monday, June 16th, 2025. I remember the date with almost painful clarity. I had spent the morning immersed in researching some rare documents concerning the life of the Roman Jewish community during the Renaissance. I was so absorbed that I hadn't noticed the insistent ticking of the clock. I decided to take a short break and get a coffee at a small bar nearby on Via del Portico d'Ottavia. The day was muggy, a typical Roman early summer, and the air vibrated with that dense heat that makes every movement arduous. I was crossing the street, my hands clutching my reading glasses and a notebook full of notes. It was then that I heard a deafening noise, a screech of tires, and then a violent impact. The world turned upside down. Darkness enveloped me. Not a serene darkness, but a deafening void, a sensation of infinite falling. I expected nothingness, the end, but instead I found myself in an extraordinary place. The first thing I perceived was a light, but not an earthly light. It was not the sun nor a lamp, but a light that emanated warmth, peace, and infinite knowledge. It enveloped everything, not only illuminating the surroundings, but penetrating every fiber of my being with an indescribable serenity. Every worry, every burden I had carried in life vanished. It was as if I had finally come home. As I tried to make sense of it all, I noticed colors, shades I had never seen before, pulsing with life and energy. The air itself resonated with a celestial harmony, music that did not come from a specific direction, but that was everywhere, an echo of pure joy and love. Then I saw someone approaching. It was my grandfather, Shlomo. He had died when I was just a child, but there he was, vibrant and full of life, as if in the prime of his years. I recognized him instantly. His smile was the same, but there was something ethereal about him, a purity and a light I couldn't explain. "Micah," he said, his voice full of love and warmth, "you must not be afraid. He is waiting for you." Before I could ask what he meant, he reached out and touched me. In that instant, I felt a deep connection, as if every question I would have wanted to ask him had been answered without the need for words. It was all so overwhelming, and at the same time so comforting. "There's something you need to see," he said, and suddenly the light around me became brighter, more focused. And there he was, the presence. I'm not exaggerating when I say that trying to describe him is impossible. He was like no image or depiction I'd ever seen. His presence was both human and divine, radiating a love and power I'd never felt before. His eyes contained everything: compassion, wisdom, and a depth that seemed to see straight through me, not just who I am, but who I have been and who I am destined to be. I fell to my knees, not out of fear, but because being in that presence was so humbling. He reached out and placed his hand on my shoulder. "Micah," he said, his voice gentle yet authoritative. "There is something you must see, something my people must know before my return." The presence spoke to me with a voice that resonated in my soul, not my ears, and then the vision enveloped me. It wasn't like watching a movie, but like living every moment, feeling every emotion, perceiving the very texture of the reality being shown to me. The first event, what he called the Great Distraction, unfolded before me with startling clarity. I found myself transported to a dimension where time seemed to flow differently, or perhaps I was perceiving it in an altered way. Before my eyes, a global panorama unfolded, a mosaic of human lives in every corner of the world, but all with a disturbing common thread: an absolute and almost robotic dependence on digital devices. It wasn't just phones, but screens of every size, tablets, virtual reality headsets covering entire faces, even holographic projections dancing in the air, all flooding the mind with incessant information and stimuli. I saw entire families sitting at tables, food untouched, but no eyes meeting. Every member was hunched over their screen, fingers scrolling automatically, faces illuminated by the cold light of the displays. It seemed they were physically together, but their souls were thousands of miles away, prisoners of virtual worlds. The sound of laughter was stifled by the frantic tapping on virtual keyboards. Conversations were reduced to distracted murmurs, or even worse, awkward silences. Then the scene shifted to public places, crowded squares, train stations, parks. People walked with their gazes fixed downwards or with headphones sealing off all external sound. There was no interaction, no awareness of the surroundings. A child would fall, and the parents, busy watching a video, would react belatedly, their attention sucked elsewhere. An elderly person would ask for help, but their words were lost in the digital din that enveloped the silent crowd. The most painful thing was seeing how this distraction affected even those who called themselves believers. In synagogues, churches, places of worship, many were not there in heart and mind. Their eyes wandered to hidden screens, their thoughts interrupted by incessant notifications. Prayer became an emptied habit, the study of scriptures a hurried activity between checks. It seemed that the sacred lost its resonance, covered by the background noise of a world always connected but disconnected from the essential. The presence made me understand that the enemy did not need wars or immediate catastrophes to turn humanity away from God. A more subtle, yet infinitely more insidious strategy sufficed: constant distraction. "This is how the enemy works," the presence said, his voice now imbued with a deep lament for humanity. "He keeps them so busy, so preoccupied with the transient, with trivialities that have no eternal importance. Their attention is fragmented, their minds dulled by the uninterrupted flow of information and entertainment. They no longer reflect, they no longer seek the deep. Their ability to hear my voice is obscured by the incessant noise of the world. Tell my people to wake up, to refocus their hearts and minds on me. Only in me will they find true peace and direction, not in the ephemeral clamor of the world." The vision dissolved, leaving me with a sense of urgency burning within me. As the vision of the great distraction vanished, a new scene took shape, even more unsettling than the last. The presence drew closer, and his voice resonated with a solemnity that made me tremble, though I was without a physical body. This was the second event, the Great Deception. I found myself immersed in an atmosphere charged with anticipation, almost feverish. The sky itself seemed to come alive, not with clouds or natural phenomena, but with spectacular illuminations, formations of light that danced with a beauty never before seen on Earth. It seemed that all of humanity had their noses pointed skyward, mesmerized by these celestial displays. These were lights that changed shape, colors that defied physics, luminous trails that intertwined into complex and fascinating designs. People were in ecstasy, filming with their devices, the ones they had just moments before been unable to tear themselves away from, and compulsively sharing these wonders, acclaiming them as signs of a new era, of a long-awaited contact. But it wasn't just lights. Soon, from these luminous manifestations, figures began to appear. Beings of dazzling beauty, with an indescribable grace and charisma. Their form was ethereal, almost perfect, and their presence radiated a sense of peace and wisdom that was hard not to embrace. They spoke to humanity with mellifluous, reassuring voices, promising an era of universal peace, global unity, and spiritual enlightenment. They claim to have come to guide humanity towards a better future, to solve the world's problems, to bring a deeper understanding of truth and existence. Their words were captivating. They spoke of overcoming divisions, of uniting religions into a single universal faith, of awakening the latent divine potential within every human being. They used spiritual terms that seemed familiar, but filled them with a new, subtly deviated meaning. I saw millions of people from every culture and creed fall under their spell. Politicians, scientists, spiritual leaders, all seemed fascinated, ready to follow their directives. They were so convincing, so seemingly benevolent, that few dared to doubt. The most painful thing was observing how even steadfast believers were drawn into this illusion. Not all, but many. Some saw in these beings the fulfillment of prophecies, mistaking them for divine messengers, or even the very manifestation of the awaited return. They were seduced by promises of easy peace, superior knowledge, and immediate resolution to the problems plaguing the world. Their words, so full of love and light, were mixed with subtle lies, small deviations from the truth that, taken together, created a completely false narrative. Many turned away from the scriptures they had always followed because the new revelations seemed more enlightening, more suited to modern times. The presence let out a sigh of deep sorrow. "These do not come from me," his voice said, now carrying an echo of warning. "They are wolves in sheep's clothing, angels of light who bring darkness with them. They will mix truth with lies, leading many astray. Their beauty is a mask, their charisma a bait. Their peace is an illusion, their unity a tyranny that suffocates true faith. Tell my people to remain rooted in my word, for it is the only foundation that cannot be shaken. They will try to undermine the truth with empty promises and false miracles. But my word is eternal and unchangeable. It is the only light in this growing darkness." The vision faded, leaving me with a sense of grave, imminent danger, but also with the firm certainty that the truth, however unpopular, would remain the only salvation. After the profound unease of the Great Deception, the scene changed, and I was enveloped by a feeling of almost palpable hope. The presence guided me to the third event, a phenomenon so powerful it made every fiber of my being vibrate: the Great Awakening. The vision opened with images radiating a pure light, not the cold luminescence of the devices from the Great Distraction, nor the deceptive lights of the Great Deception, but a warm, living light that pulsed from the very hearts of the people. I saw waves of this light spread throughout the world like a divine contagion, starting from small pockets and then engulfing entire cities, nations, continents. It was a spiritual awakening of biblical proportions, something that transcended all expectations and all historical precedents. Families, the very same ones I had seen before engrossed in their screens, were now kneeling together in their homes. They weren't reciting rote prayers, but were praying with an intensity and passion I had never before perceived. The voices of parents joined those of their children in sincere supplications, in confessions of sin, in expressions of gratitude that seemed to reach heaven. Faces were streaked with tears, not of sadness, but of deep contrition and joy for the reconnection. Communities were transforming, streets, squares, parks, places that had once witnessed distraction and deception, now teemed with people gathering spontaneously. There were no more walls between people. Ethnic and social divisions seemed to vanish. People embraced each other, helped each other, shared food and stories. Worship and repentance were commonplace. I heard songs of praise rising from everywhere, improvised melodies, but filled with such profound devotion that they made the air tremble. Many openly testified to radical changes in their lives, not out of boastfulness, but from an explosion of joy they couldn't contain. And with this awakening, miracles were happening everywhere. These were events that defied every natural law I knew. I saw the sick instantly healed, not in hospitals or with medicine, but through prayer and faith. People who had been paralyzed walked, the blind saw, the deaf heard. These weren't small signs, but evident, undeniable wonders. But not only physical healings. I observed lives transformed in an instant. Addicts freed from their bondages, criminals genuinely repenting, broken relationships miraculously restored. It was a tide of grace flooding the world, bringing hope and new life. However, with this immense wave of blessings, a shadow also came. Persecution. Those who clung to distraction and delusion could not tolerate this light. I saw believers being mocked, attacked, and even killed for their faith. They were ridiculed by the media, marginalized by society, deprived of their livelihoods. In some places, they suffered physical violence, were imprisoned and martyred. Yet, despite all this, their joy was unwavering. There was no bitterness on their faces, only a peace and strength that came from a higher source. They were willing to lose everything to remain faithful. "My spirit will move powerfully in these days," the presence said, his voice now with a note of triumph mixed with solemn warning. "It will be a time of great gathering, a final harvest before the fulfillment. But the cost of following me will be great. The world will oppose this light, for it exposes its darkness. Tell them to stand firm, not to give in to fear or the allure of an easier path, for the reward is eternal. Their perseverance will be an even more powerful testimony than the miracles they will see. Their faithfulness amidst suffering will be the seal of my presence in them." The vision faded, but the warmth of hope and the determination of the persecuted believers remained etched in my heart. After the vision of the Great Awakening and its persecution, the scene shifted again, and an almost intolerable anticipation filled the ethereal air. The presence led me to the final event, the culmination of all that had been revealed, the Great Return. It was not an image, nor a feeling, but an overwhelming reality that transcended all human comprehension. The sky, which I had previously seen filled with deceptive lights, now prepared for a spectacle of such magnificence and power as to overshadow any other manifestation. It was not a gradual opening, but a sudden tear, the sky splitting in two like a giant curtain opening onto a divine scene. There was no sound, but a deafening silence that preceded the most significant event in history. The vastness and depth of this tear were unimaginable, revealing not the darkness of space, but a light so brilliant, so pure, that it could not be sustained by the human eye, except by grace. And there, from that uncontainable light, he himself appeared, coming in glory. He was not an ethereal figure or a ghostly apparition, but a corporeal, tangible presence, yet imbued with absolute divinity. His figure was surrounded by an incalculable multitude of legions of angels, heavenly hosts stretching infinitely, each a being of light and power. Their arrival was not accompanied by earthly fanfares, but by a sound that was music and majesty together, a harmony that filled the entire universe. Every angel, with its shimmering armor and expression of adoration, amplified the greatness of him they were escorting. In that moment, the entire world stopped. All human activity ceased instantly. Factories fell silent. Traffic halted. Voices died out. Every living being on Earth, from every nation, tribe, language, and people, was forced to acknowledge his coming. It was not a choice, but an inevitable act in the face of such glory. Every knee bowed and every tongue confessed that he is Lord. It was a moment of absolute truth, in which every deception, every lie, every doubt was swept away by his irrefutable presence. The reaction to this revelation, however, was not uniform. Some prostrated themselves in ecstatic adoration, their faces flooded with tears of joy and profound reverence. These were the ones who had waited, the ones who had persevered, and for them, this was the fulfillment of every promise, the end of all sorrow. Their voices, once stifled by persecution, now joined in a chorus of praise that resonated throughout creation. There was no more fear, only a piety and unconditional love that completely enveloped them. But for others, the confession was made in terror. Their faces were pale, contorted by panic and despair. They understood in that instant the gravity of their neglect, their rejection. Their lives lived in indifference. His light, which for the faithful was love and salvation, for them was the revelation of judgment, a flame that burned away all falsehood and inner darkness. I saw the horror in their eyes as they realized the truth they had ignored, and the time for repentance had now expired. There was no escape, no hiding place, no denial possible. "This is what awaits," said the Presence, his voice resonating with a power that shook the foundations of the nothingness in which I found myself. It was the voice of fulfillment, of final destiny. "Tell them I am coming soon." It is not a threat, but a promise, a loving warning to prepare. Tell them to be ready, for no one knows the day or the hour. Time is a precious gift. It must not be wasted. Every choice made now will echo in that moment. The vision began to dissolve, but the image of that glory and that dread remained impressed more vividly than anything I had ever seen or learned in my entire life. It left me with the unwavering certainty that, beyond all debate or skepticism, this is the destiny that awaits humanity. As the vision began to fade, I found myself still kneeling before the Presence, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I had witnessed. Yet his gaze never wavered. It was as if the entire universe could wait. While he spoke directly to me, his words imprinted upon my heart. "Micah," he said, "the world is entering a time like no other it has known. You have seen what is about to happen, but remember this: I am always with you, and I am always with my people. My love is unchanging, and my promises are unbreakable. Even amidst trials and chaos, those who trust in me will find a peace beyond all understanding." He paused, and the light around him seemed to grow even warmer, as if his mere presence was enough to dispel all fear. "There will be days of doubt, even for you, but know this: I chose you for this message not because you are perfect, but because you are willing. Trust in my strength, not your own, and remember that the message is not yours to carry alone. My Spirit will guide you and give you the words when the time is right." Before I could respond, he placed his hand on my heart, and I felt a wave of love so profound it brought tears to my eyes. "Tell my people that I see their struggles, their fears, and their failures. I am not distant from their pain. I am the God who heals, who restores, who makes all things new. They are never alone. I am always with them." As his hand lifted, the brilliance of the light began to change, and I could sense that the experience was drawing to a close. "Now, Micah," he said with the gentlest urgency, "it is time for you to go back. Your work is not finished. Tell them I am coming soon." In an instant, everything changed. The vivid colors, the music, the overwhelming peace. It all seemed to collapse inward, as if sucked through a pinhole of light. And then I felt it. A jolt, a pull, and a rush of sensations as I was brought back into my body. The first thing I noticed was the pain. My chest burned, as if fire had been rekindled within me. My lungs gasped, drawing in air with a desperation I had never known before. I opened my eyes to the faces of the paramedics bending over me, their expressions a mixture of shock and relief. "He's back," one of them said, his voice trembling. "We got him." I could barely move, barely speak, but the tears streaming down my face were not from pain. They were from the overwhelming gratitude I felt for what I had just experienced. I wanted to tell them, to tell everyone, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was squeeze the hand of one of the paramedics, trying to convey what I could. I hadn't yet put into words the days that followed. They were physically and emotionally overwhelming. My recovery was nothing short of miraculous. Despite being hit by a car, my injuries were far less severe than anyone expected. The doctors were baffled, calling my survival and rapid healing incredible and inexplicable. But I knew the truth. During those first few days of recovery, as I lay in a hospital bed, I relived everything I had seen and heard. My grandfather's voice, the presence, the vision of future events that would unfold starting in July 2025. With it came a profound and unwavering clarity. I had to share this, no matter how difficult or unbelievable it might seem. Returning to normal life wasn't easy. I struggled to describe what had happened to those closest to me. How do you explain such a profoundly otherworldly experience to people who might not understand? Some listened with wonder, others looked at me with doubt, but I remembered what the presence had said. Some will doubt, some will mock, but those with ears to hear will understand and prepare. My mission is now clear, however arduous. I must spread this message so that others can prepare for what is to come.